From Washington, the McLaughlin Group, the American original. For over 3 decades, the sharpest minds, best sources, hardest talk.
Issue 1, policies on poverty.
The city really needs to step up. The government needs to step up and help them.
According to the Weingart Center, approximately 82,000 people out of 254,000 are permanently homeless in Los Angeles County, California. And note this, 50% of homeless Angelenos are African Americans. 25% are mentally ill. 20% are veterans. Around half suffering from substance abuse. Also, 20% are physically disabled. 32% have a bachelor's degree or higher. And 16 to 20% are employed. Most citizens welcome their city officials' initiative of injecting $1 billion to counter homelessness, except for one little detail. They don't want to be taxed. But Los Angeles isn't alone. New York this week announced 500 new beds for those homeless in the Big Apple. Also this week, Washington, D.C., its council raised the minimum wage to $15 an hour. Republican House Speaker Paul Ryan released proposals to reform federal anti-poverty programs. Finally, President Obama added 9 new promise zones to prioritize federal support for impoverished areas. Question, will we reduce poverty? Pat Buchanan.
John, we declared war on poverty back in the Johnson administration, the Great Society. Trillions and trillions of dollars have been spent. We now have more people in poverty almost, or as many as we had in poverty then, despite money for housing, for education, 50 million people on food stamps, hundreds of thousands of bureaucrats now working on the issue of poverty. The point is, I think the Bible was right when the Lord said, the poor you shall always have with you. And I think that's the case. The point is, we do not know how to cure poverty and the causes of it, some of which are relatively new, the complete destruction of the family, the rise in the use of drugs and narcotics, all the rest of it, the social disorder that eventually produces it. I think you're going to have to keep taking care of folks, but the idea that we're going to end it and resolve it and all these folks are going back into society, it's a dream.
No. Actually, we do know how to fix a lot of these problems. John, you had a question.
What explains Speaker Ryan's focus on poverty?
Paul Ryan is basically an acolyte of Jack Kemp, former member of Congress. Actually, he was a vice presidential candidate with Bob Dole in 1996, former Buffalo Bills quarterback, a very charismatic fellow who really felt humanitarian impulses and thought you could, through enterprise zones and various governmental initiatives, that you really could solve the issue of poverty. And Ryan has been touring the country and trying to come up with various policies. I don't know that they're going to get anywhere in the Congress that he's in, and frankly, they count a lot on cutting federal programs. And I think we ought to be talking about raising the minimum wage. We ought to be talking about an infrastructure program that puts people to work. And we need affordable housing. And part of that story out of Los Angeles is that they've had a lot of success in reducing homelessness among veterans and among families, because they have really focused on creating temporary housing for them that gets them back into sort of middle-class life.
Why has Los Angeles' population of homeless veterans dropped by 30% since last year?
Because the city and different cities and localities across the country have been able to unify investment. It is a bipartisan project because of the veterans issue. But one of the things we can do, and history proves, is that the mechanism of economic growth that is broadly shared is the key way to reduce poverty. And one of the challenges I think we have is we have to identify not just the homeless issue, but looking at Los Angeles, for example, which has an unemployment rate of 7.1%. You contrast that with Texas, which has unemployment rates in the big cities, Houston, San Antonio, Texas, in the 3 to 4% level. Lower taxes, providing economic opportunity that is broadly shared. And one of the things that I worry about with Los Angeles, they're talking about raising a 0.5 tax on earnings above 1 million. Sounds great, but that'll raise the marginal tax rate there to 48%. And at some point you see a diminishing return, and the notion of redistribution of income is not the same as social mobility.
Clarence, is the United States winning or losing the war on poverty?
Well, poverty would be a lot worse if it hadn't been for that war on poverty back there 50 years ago. And we find today that other kinds of reforms like the earned income tax credit has been a very effective reducer of poverty. And now these are people who are working Americans, but they get a tax break because they don't have the kind of support that they need to for housing and food, et cetera, at the lower income levels. And I think you got the right approach here, though, by looking at this state by state, because that's really where the war on poverty is going on today, is in various states.
Is America winning or losing the war on poverty?
Well, I would say we're winning in terms of controlling it. Pat is right. I think the poor will always be with us, but so is Tom, because in the 1990s, when we had prosperity, poverty rates went down dramatically. Also, the welfare reform that was imposed by Clinton and Newt Gingrich and Congress turned out wasn't as disastrous as we were afraid of. And in fact, a million kids were elevated out of the welfare rolls. And I think that's, so we need a little bit of both. We find when opportunities are opened up, when you've got a robust economy, poverty goes down.
The figure I have, the poverty rate was 19%. Today the rate is 8.5%.
Oh, no.
Yeah, that's a little high.
Who says oh no?
I say oh no. I'm sure it's been 13, 14, 15 for all, ever since when, again, but that's not counting the value of the housing and the food stamps and the free education, all the rest of it.
You know, it's almost a luxury to talk about the poor and poverty because we've been so focused on a much broader segment of America. Entire middle class has been losing out. So there's going to be a lot to talk about in this presidential election, and I'm looking forward to Paul Ryan's proposals being carried forward by Donald Trump if they can ever get together.
Okay, Switzerland's approach. Switzerland is a small nation on the European continent, known for its picturesque mountains, fine skiing, and high wealth. Switzerland's per capita GDP is $59,000, as opposed to U.S. per capita income at $46,500. Yet, last Sunday, Swiss voters rejected a guaranteed annual payment of around $2,500 to every adult Swiss. Supporters say the payment fosters equality and reduces poverty, but to the rank-and-file Swiss, giving away free money isn't always welfare. Most regard it as bitter chocolate. Question: should the U.S. create its own social experiment and distribute free money to some of its citizens?
John?
Let's try this out on Eleanor.
I remember when Richard Nixon was in office, and I think he did propose a guaranteed annual income. I don't see that flying in today's society, in today's politics. It's going nowhere. But if you project into the future and you look at the nature of work and how it's changing and where are all the jobs going to come for the population, I could imagine someday in the distant future another Congress and another president proposing a guaranteed annual income, replacing a lot of perhaps
Well, this is what Milton Friedman's famous idea of the negative income tax, to give everybody a certain amount of money, and then we'd replace all these poverty programs. We'd get rid of all the bureaucrats and stuff. What happens is you get the guaranteed annual income, and all the poverty programs and all the rest of it remain.
Right.
That's kind of what the earned income tax credit tries to do, though, is to help to subsidize the low income
One
earners.
of the things that happens with these programs, frankly, is that you get folks in poverty, all the benefits they get in terms of education, food stamps, EITC, other things, there's a tax on them. If they go to work, they start losing these things. The marginal tax is incredible.
That's very quick.
That's why it must be revisited every few years, because and it was under Clinton and again under Bush and Obama. We need to look at it because these economics do change as far as agriculture.
We always have this dichotomy in the way we approach people at the top. You figure the more money they have, they're going to create jobs. people at the bottom, oh, if you give them too many federal benefits, that will suppress their desire to work. I mean, why don't we flip it once and try it the other way?
There is an opportunity there, I think, for consensus. You see Paul Ryan, Paddy Murray, that they are interested in dialogue, and there are other people. If we can talk about a way that you can encourage work, that a process, that the benefits don't just cut, but also have reform that induces people to go to work rather than encourages dependence.
I was really looking forward to a resurgence of the Republican war on poverty this time around, because you do have people like
opportunity lives where I write. You should
Marco
read that.
Rubio was talking about it, and various other candidates were talking about it. And then Trump came along, and suddenly it was the government's the enemy, blah, blah, blah. He's not interested in a real policy dialogue, and I think if he gets elected, we're not going to have any serious talk about
There's not a lot of money around, Clarence.
It's a matter of rearranging the money,
We've got a
Pat.
$500 billion
No, it's a matter of rearranging the money.
Up.
Well,
It's going to go higher and higher.
But it's a matter of rearranging the money in a way to restore incentives. I mean, we need to talk about some ideas
The best
anyway.
incentive is the necessity to eat.
Well, how about Social Security? You want to preserve Social Security or change it? That requires a dialogue, and we're not having that. All Trump says is, let's keep Social Security strong, give them more money.
All the Democrats, the key Democrats, are now in favor of increasing benefits.
Yeah, and so's Donald Trump.
Right.
Donald
Exactly.
Trump, you know, right?
Well, apparently what Trump's doing is working. As a matter of fact, he's in our own state.
You mean working as far as winning Republican voters?
That's correct.
Yeah, but how about Democratic and Independent voters, John? That has to be decided in
always
November.
thinking of your own.
I'm thinking of November. That's right. I want democracy.
Issue 2, Donald versus Hillary.
The first time in our nation's history that a woman will be a major party's nominee.
To all of those Bernie Sanders voters who have been left out in the cold by a rigged system of superdelegates, we welcome you with open arms.
Try election. Then let's slip the nominees to the fore. 5 months from today, on Tuesday, November the 8th, we will vote to elect the next president of the United States. Securing enough delegates to claim the Democratic Party's presidential nomination, Hillary Clinton on Tuesday called for party unity. Liberal focus must now fall, she says, on defeating Donald Trump. And on Thursday, top Democrats, including President Obama and Senator Elizabeth Warren, endorsed Clinton.
I know how hard this job can be. That's why I know Hillary will be so good at it.
But there's a notable holdout. Clinton challenger, Senator Bernie Sanders, who says he will continue to fight on for every delegate. Still, the general election is likely to be close. The Real Clear Politics average of polls shows Hillary Clinton with a, get this, 2-point lead over Donald Trump. Question: what does President Obama's endorsement mean for Hillary? I ask you, Eleanor.
Well, this is the first sitting president in some time who's going to be out there enthusiastically on the campaign trail. George W. Bush really wasn't welcomed by John McCain. And Ronald Reagan really didn't campaign aggressively for George H.W. Bush. So this is a big moment. President Obama's approval rating is now in the low 50s. He's a pretty popular political figure. You put together Elizabeth Warren, to me it's like all the Democratic superheroes are putting on their capes and they're suiting up for the big engagement. And I think Bernie Sanders is going to give people like me who live in the District of Columbia a chance to vote on Tuesday. We're the final primary. And then he's going to move to be part of this team effort, really, to defeat Donald Trump and to bring aboard all the people he has genuinely excited. I mean, he does deserve the recognition that he's going to get for how he's energized this process.
You know, there's no doubt Barack Obama, especially when he gets in his the White House Correspondents' Dinner mode with his speechwriters, is tremendously effective, I think, as a speaker in that mode and a political speaker. And he's got a real animus against Donald Trump, and he's going to be a very effective surrogate. I'd think less so with Elizabeth Warren. But I will say this, there's no doubt Hillary Clinton had the best week of her campaign, and of many campaigns. Her speeches were well, and it's a big moment for her. But the future holds a lot of problems for her. I mean, Trump's down only 3. I can't believe it. He's down only 3. Ahead of us, there's economic news. Ahead of us, the FBI primary. FBI, don't fail me now. And so you got that coming ahead. You got that coming ahead. You got the conventions are going to be big events. The Republicans could be very exciting. And again, the economy is moving. If you get another month like May, there's going to be real panic in the Democratic ranks.
Yeah.
Now that Hillary is the presumptive nominee, will she shake the Etch-a-Sketch and try to reinvent herself as a centrist?
Well, I think very quickly, but I think the challenge here for Hillary Clinton is that as much as Donald Trump is saying he won't back down with his persistent things, the La Raza situation in San Diego, he has a little bit, he should not have framed it in the way he did in terms of Mexican heritage, but in terms of that organization, I think there is a suggestion of liberal bias that a federal judge should be held to the same standards
You're defending Donald Trump, what he said about the judge?
I am saying that was outrageous in terms of the Mexican heritage, but what you should have is the same thing as U.S. military officers, not being aligned with an organization as the La Raza Group is, which is overtly political one way. The problem for Hillary Clinton, however, is that if you look at the situation just today with Raj Fernandez, Fernando, who's this big fundraiser, superdelegate, who Hillary, when she was Secretary of State, appointed to a senior board, big-time donor to the Clinton Foundation. It is another example of the persistent reek of corruption. And so you have
in regard to Donald Trump and the judge, if he really has a beef, his lawyers can file a complaint, but they have not. Why? Because if they file a complaint and it proves to be frivolous, they can be disbarred. Trump has got First Amendment freedom to say whatever the heck he wants, and that's what he's doing right now, spouting off his mouth. And first of all, where's Trump's IRS tax returns? I mean, all the presidents we've had till now. Well, exactly, on both sides.
I don't disagree.
Trump is just opening up that whole...
I don't disagree with you, Clint, to what you said about Trump. He should file against the judge, probably should file. But I do agree with you. Look, what did he say? He said, look, the judge is sticking it to me, and I think it's because he's Mexican and they got it in for me because of the wall. There's nothing wrong. That is not a racist statement.
And then it turns out he's born in Indiana and he's Mexican descent.
Is it possible he's biased against Trump? Yes, it's possible.
But not because he's Mexican, because of the organization. Because of the organization.
That puts up, sure, the organization is very much militant on the other side.
You and Tom stand alone virtually among all the Republican leaders who have characterized what Trump says as a racist statement.
I don't care. They're wrong. They're headed for the tall grass, as they always do when the trouble comes.
Right.
Look at the statement.
They're going to take a lot of voters.
I don't disagree with you. It's an unwise statement. It does not mean racist.
If you're judging somebody purely by the ethnicity of their surname, that's what Trump is doing. That's what she means by racist.
He's saying he could be biased.
Who does the zeitgeist? You know what the meaning of zeitgeist is?
Yeah, I do.
Spirit of the times. Spirit of the times.
Who does the zeitgeist of 2016 favor more? Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump?
I think Hillary is the favorite, but I will say this. The country is desperate for change. Bernie Sanders represented it. Trump beats Hillary 2-1 on Americans who want change. Yeah. She's had her best week, but I'll tell you, the weeks ahead are going to be win-lose, win-lose.
She crushes him on competence and knowledge. And Americans may want change, but not the kind of change that Donald Trump seems to be bringing. He's playing in a different arena now. He's not catering to a segment of the public that votes in Republican primaries. He's dealing with a much broader electorate now.
He's only 3 points behind.
But apparently
we don't elect nationally, as I pointed out a week ago, or Al Gore would be president.
But the very point you're making helps Trump the more. Just ask Jeb Bush. The zeitgeist of 2016 favors outsiders and change.
And it favors somebody like Hillary Clinton and Elizabeth Warren who know how to throw a punch back at a bully. You don't back down when there's a bully in the ring.
Hillary is same old, same old.
Pat, I don't think you've ever been in the Hillary camp. To me, this is a new age. This is a new age. This is a new age with a woman capturing a major party nomination. That's not same old, same old.
I can't stand the excitement.
I love it.
Is it a paradox that Hillary is on the ballot, but Democratic women and Democratic-leaning women are less enthusiastic now than in 2008?
How did she manage to win almost 4 million more votes than Bernie Sanders if nobody's excited about her? She's not going to win every woman in America. nobody wins everybody in every group. But I think there's a recognition that this is a history-making moment.
Women kind of stick together, don't they?
But she's not being voted upon because she's a woman. And also women's, John, if you look closely at the polling among women, younger women are less supportive than the older women are. But that's partly because the younger women don't remember the prosperity of the 90s and a number of other elements. They don't remember the bad old days as far as women's rights were concerned. But Hillary and certainly Elizabeth Warren, people
well, that's where
like
Elizabeth
that
Warren comes in. She reminds people very clearly of the issues that are at stake here. They're not all gender-based issues. It's Wall Street, and it's a lot of the concerns that Bernie Sanders brought to the fore. And the fact that she's fully backing Hillary Clinton I think is going to be very meaningful to getting together the coalition that elected Barack Obama 2 times.
Issue 3, Modi's operandi.
India applauds the great sacrifices of the men and women from the land of the free and the home of the brave in service of mankind.
The size of Western Europe and the world's most populous democracy, with over 1.25 billion citizens. India. This week, Prime Minister Narendra Modi made his 4th visit to Washington and addressed a joint session of Congress. He promised mutual U.S.-Indian prosperity and shared values. The statistics reflect his claim. U.S.-India trade nearly doubled between 2009 and 2015. The U.S. and India are also expected to sign new deals on areas of military cooperation and nuclear technology. Still, rough waters may await ahead. A rising China is extending influence across oceans, and India faces pressure to either support the U.S. or adopt a more pro-China policy. In a sign India may be leaning towards the latter option, Mr. Modi has in recent months pursued new investments from the China-led Asia Investment and Infrastructure Bank, or AIIB, which, by the way, Washington opposes. Question: is India our ally? Tom Rogan.
Yes, but I think India should be more of an ally, and we can make that. And I think Prime Minister Modi is very amenable to that. Look, he wants to join the nuclear security group. The Obama administration says it supports it, but like a lot of foreign policy, the words do not match up with the forceful diplomacy to make that happen. One of the big reasons, though, I think India offers this great opportunity is that the OECD says that while there's 5 to 10% of the population of India is in the middle class at the moment, by 2039 that will be 90%. And for a country of 1.25 billion people, that's a lot of potential for American high-value consumer exports to go to. And secondly, if we're looking about an alliance alongside nations like India that can counterbalance Chinese authoritarianism and Russia because of values and that economic and military power, that is an opportunity.
I hope you're not talking about a military alliance, John. That would be an absurdity. The Chinese have claims on Indian territory. India says it's stealing territory. And to get ourselves into the middle of that quarrel, as well as the South China Sea and the East China Sea, would be ridiculous.
It's not too long before they're going to overtake China as the most populous country in the world. And moving all those people into the middle class is a huge strain on the environment. And President Obama really cares about climate change, and he's really trying to bring Modi along to at least get him to where China is, where they will make some commitments in terms of using sustainable energy and make some commitments in curbing greenhouse gas. That's very important for the future of the planet.
Also, it must be said that there is pressure on Modi. The clock is running because he wants to secure a better trade agreement, and he wants to do it before Donald Trump possibly gets elected. So there's a big push on that.
Oh, interesting.
Well, this is Pat's tutorial once again. India and China have disputed borders in the Himalayas, and China has made recent ground incursions across India's borders. This is helping to drive India closer to the U.S.
Exactly, but we don't necessarily want to have them an ally. It's too bad you got the problem with the Chinese, but the Americans are not going to come and fight in the Himalayas.
I don't think anyone's saying that, but if we have
You said a military alliance.
I said an alliance with India. You all have caveated alliances. If the UK invaded France, would we support the UK in doing that, or anything theoretical
France
like
is
that?
our oldest ally. You know that.
Okay, but you get my point. The problem is if you can have a relationship with India in terms of oceanic trade routes,
fine.
Right? But so a security alliance should be predicated on that Indian.
No, we're not going to fight for
then how are we going to be able to grow our economy?
Suppose India fights Pakistan, with whom we had an alliance. Whose side are we on
They're
there?
already fighting.
Okay,
and they're
should
fighting
we
us.
involve ourselves in that?
Well, we are already involved, aren't we?
I think right now the U.S. is just looking for a market for some of its weapons. I don't think they're looking to give them a military umbrella.
I ask the question, should the U.S. back India in joining the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Group? A big deal. Yes or no? Quickly.
I have no problem with that.
Yes, and the U.S. is also pushing for India to be a permanent member of the UN Security Council.
Yes on all of those things.
Short answer, yes.
Yes, India wants to join APEC, and the U.S. should endorse membership. Predictions, Pat.
Remarkably, John, things are turning in favor of Brexit in England, and there's a real possibility, I think, with what's going on in Europe. The whole EU is declining in respect among more and more people. I think the Brits could leave on June 23rd.
Speaker Paul Ryan's waffling on Donald Trump. First he's distancing himself, then he endorses him. Now he's not really comfortable where he is. Means that Paul Ryan will no longer be the golden boy of the Republican Party. He's paying a huge price for the way he's handled Donald Trump.
Yeah, in lieu of a prediction, I just want to say that the French people and their counterterrorism services in the most significant terrorism challenge environment of the last generation are acquitting themselves with a dignity and honor that the entire world can be proud of. They're celebrating the European Cup and they are not bowing to terror.
I just want to give a special prediction of condolences and salute to Muhammad Ali and to his memory, which I think will be enhanced by history.
Good prediction.
Thank you.
I predict British voters will make history on June 23rd by voting to leave the European Union. Bye-bye, Britain.